She stood alone at the edge of the world, on the summit of one of Taiwan's highest mountains. The wind howled, the clouds swirled beneath her. And there she was, smiling, confident, dressed in nothing but a bikini. Her name was Gigi Wu. To some, she was a thrill seeker. To others, a social media sensation. But to those who really knew her, she was something else entirely. A quiet soul who found healing in the mountains. For years, she climbed peak after peak in her signature style, blending strength, grace, and a touch of rebellion. But in January of 2019, during one of her solo hikes, something went horribly wrong. She made a desperate call for help. And then, silence. This is the story of Gigi Wu, the mountain goddess, and the tragic final climb that left the world in shock. Before she became known as the Bikini hiker, Gigi Wu was just a woman who had found peace in the mountains. Born in Taiwan in 1973, she lived a pretty quiet life. No spotlight, no media attention. In fact, Gigi wasn't someone who chased fame. She was soft-spoken, thoughtful, even shy by some accounts. But something inside her changed after a serious accident in her late 30s. She had fallen while hiking, an injury that left her bedridden for months. It was a painful, lonely recovery. And during that time, she realized something. Life is short, fragile, unpredictable. When she finally healed, she didn't just return to hiking, she embraced it, completely. It became more than a hobby. It became a form of therapy, a way to connect with nature and maybe even with herself. She believed that mountains had a kind of spirit, that when you climbed high enough, you could hear your own thoughts more clearly, that the silence of nature could heal things inside you that the noise of daily life couldn't. Over the years, Gigi climbed more than 100 peaks across Taiwan, often doing solo treks. And on many of those summits, she would take a photo wearing a bikini, sometimes in the snow, sometimes in the fog, always with a calm, serene expression on her face. That was just her way of celebrating a summit, marking the moment with something joyful and a little playful. It was never about vanity. She often said she didn't consider herself sexy or famous. To her, it was just a fun tradition and a way to express freedom. Gigi Wu's story might have stayed quiet, just a personal journey between her and the mountains, if it weren't for a photo. A single photo, a bright bikini, a jagged summit, a layer of mist curling around the peaks behind her. And in the middle of it all, Gigi, standing there with a beaming smile. It was bold, unexpected, and totally unlike the usual hiking photos people were used to seeing. That photo quickly made the rounds on social media. Then came another, and another. Soon, people all across Taiwan, and even beyond, were following this mysterious woman in a bikini who kept showing up on some of the most remote peaks in the world. They started calling her the Bikini Climber. Others called her the Mountain Goddess. But for Gigi, it was never really about going viral. She once explained that the bikini wasn't meant to shock anyone. It was just a celebration, something fun she would change into after a long, brutal hike to the summit. After all, she still did the climbing in full hiking gear. Safety came first. Always. What made her so captivating wasn't just the outfits. It was the contrast. Here was this small, soft-spoken woman, often hiking completely alone, taking on some of the most rugged and dangerous terrain in Taiwan. And she was doing it with a kind of peace in her eyes, like she belonged there. She didn't post daily. She didn't stage elaborate shoots. She would hike for days, sometimes weeks, and only share photos afterward. Each one was a moment, a memory, a personal achievement. And with each post, more people connected with her. Not just because of the photos, but because she seemed fearless, free, alive. In a world where so much of our lives are spent indoors, buried in screens and stress, Gigi represented something rare. The courage to break away, to climb higher, to feel something real. But as her following grew, so did the risks and the pressure. She had unknowingly stepped into the spotlight, and no matter how experienced you are, mountains have a way of humbling even the strongest souls. It was January 2019, the start of a new year. The air was cold, the mountains quiet. Most people were still settling back into their routines after the holidays. But Gigi Wu had a different plan. She set out alone for another solo expedition, something she'd done dozens of times before. Her goal this time? A multi-day trek through the central mountain range of Taiwan. Rough terrain, unpredictable weather, steep climbs. But for Gigi, this was nothing new. She had done it all before, and she was prepared. She packed her usual gear, tent, satellite phone, emergency supplies, extra layers for warmth. She knew how to handle herself out there. She had trained for years. She had experience. She had grit. But even for the most seasoned climbers, the mountains don't always play fair. The weather can turn on you in minutes. Trails can vanish under your feet. A single misstep can change everything. On this trip, Gigi had planned to summit several peaks. She was taking a lesser-known route. Beautiful, but also less traveled, less maintained. It was the kind of trail where you're truly on your own. She kept in touch with friends during the early parts of the hike. Sent a few photos, shared updates. Everything seemed fine, normal. But then, on January 19th, something went wrong. While trying to set up camp, Gigi slipped and fell into a 20-meter ravine about 65 feet down. Her satellite phone was still working. Somehow, through the pain, she managed to call for help. She was alive, injured but responsive. Rescuers were dispatched immediately, but the weather had other plans. Rain, wind, dense fog, conditions so bad that helicopters couldn't get to her. The ground rescue team began the climb, but it would take them hours, even a full day, to reach her location. Time was against her, and the cold was setting in. She had survived the fall. She had done everything right, but now Gigi Wu was alone, injured, waiting, and the clock was ticking. When rescue crews finally reached Gigi Wu the next day, it was too late. She had died from hypothermia, alone, deep in the mountains she loved. News of her death spread quickly, but so did the headlines, and many of them got it wrong. Most media outlets focused on one thing: the bikini. Climber dies after hiking in a swimsuit. Instagram star's dangerous hobby ends in tragedy. Bikini climber dies on the mountain. Those were the kinds of titles that flooded the internet. They painted her as someone reckless, someone chasing fame in dangerous conditions. But that wasn't the truth. Yes, Gigi Wu wore bikinis on mountain summits, but only after reaching them. Only after the hard part was over. She hiked fully clothed, wearing proper gear for cold, wind, and rain, just like any experienced climber would. Her bikini photos were never about being careless. They were about celebrating strength, freedom, and pushing past limits, both physical and personal. Friends and fellow hikers were quick to defend her. They spoke up online, correcting the narrative, reminding people that Gigi was an experienced mountaineer, a cautious one, a smart one. She wasn't just some internet daredevil. She had over 100 climbs under her belt. She trained hard, she planned carefully, and she respected the mountains deeply. But those details didn't always make the headlines. It was easier to reduce her story to something sensational, something clickable, and that hurt. Because Gigi's story wasn't just a tragedy, it was also a reminder of how easily someone's legacy can be distorted, how quickly a person's life can be reduced to a single photo, a single choice, taken out of context. Her death was a real loss for her family, her friends, and the hiking community she inspired. And behind the viral headlines was a woman who simply loved the mountains, who found joy in the climb, who died doing what she loved, but not because of how she dressed.